Welcome to She Wears the Pants, the podcast where women build companies that can hold their calling. I'm your host, Ashley Deland, business advisor, multi-business founder, and startup investor, guiding women to scale with structure, strategy, and self-mastery. Every week, we go behind the scenes of high-growth, women-led brands to talk about the real work, the identity evolution, the leadership required, and the strategy that actually sustains success. If you're ready to build a business and life you love, you're in the right room. Welcome back to She Wears the Pants, the place where high-growth women come to build companies that match their calling. I'm your host, Ashley Deland, and today's guest is a rare leader whose work reshaped an entire industry and redefined what it meant to turn frustration into a category creation. She is Allie Webb, an American entrepreneur, New York Times best-selling author, beauty industry pioneer, and serial founder. In 2010, she took a simple idea, blowouts only, and turned it into Dry Bar, a salon empire that grew nationwide, launched iconic product lines, and became a category of its own. She has been named one of the 100 most creative people in business, appeared on Shark Tank, and built multiple million ventures that sit at the intersection of culture, experience, and commerce. Allie doesn't just build brands, she reimagines what's possible and what ambitious women in business can look like. Allie, welcome so much to She Wears the Pants.
Wow. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Do you ever get tired of hearing your own intro?
No.
No.
No. In a word, no. Because you're just kind of trucking along, doing your thing, and it's easy to kind of like forget all the stuff that you've
Greatness
done.
behind you, yeah.
Yeah, so it's nice to kind of be reminded because I don't think about that stuff very often. So when you hear it, it's like, oh right, I did that stuff. That's pretty cool.
From our house. It's
Yeah.
funny because we're like in the day-to-day grind of being an
Right.
entrepreneur and a mother. And, we don't always look like this, even though it's very casual. Like I'm a messy bun running after a 3-year-old. You have children as well.
Yes. Yeah. Just life, right?
Life gets definitely heavy. All right, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in the entrepreneurial world.
Well, I think it was kind of in my blood. My parents were entrepreneurs, and from the time I was like a little kid, my brother and I were working in they had like a what's called the schmata business, like kind of older ladies clothing, moo if you will, in where I grew up in South Florida. So it was like from as early as I can remember, watching my parents run and operate a business. So I think that was my background, but I don't even think I was thinking like, oh, I want to grow up and start my own business, which is interesting and different than like I have a 21-year-old son who is very entrepreneurial now and wants to kind of he's working for somebody right now, but wants to start his own business. And I really wasn't like that. Maybe it was because my parents had their own business. Like I had, all of my jobs were like jobs working for other people, which actually I think really served me well and, laid the groundwork, if you will, for all the things that I learned and really like uniquely preparing me to do what I ended up doing. It wouldn't be until years later that I would look back on the, really rich experience I got from not only my parents, but like from my bosses. When I did finally decide to go to beauty school, because, I'm a longtime hairstylist, which is really more or less how Dry Bar came to be. I worked for this guy who owned a salon in Boca Raton where I grew up. His name is John Peters. And, I was really watching him because I wanted to learn how to do hair, mostly blowouts. But what I wouldn't realize until years later was like, he was like running the shop from the chair. He'd be doing blowouts and haircuts and whatever. And like problem after problem, person after person would come up to him and talk to him about stuff. And I really didn't think I was paying attention to any of that stuff of like how you run a business or a salon for sure. And it would I would think about that stuff so much as I was building Dry Bar of like, the way he did it and the things that I took from him that I found really impactful. So it all, I mean, we all have such different paths. The path I didn't take was going to college and getting a business degree, which I think is great if that's your calling and your path. I hated school. Like I didn't want to be in school. Not to say there's anything wrong with school, for clarity's sake. I mean, I think if that's what you like, then and that's great. And granted, there are certainly things that I missed even in like high school that I probably wish I had paid closer attention to. But I actually saw, I don't know if you follow Cody Sanchez. I'm sure you do. I mean, she's amazing. And she posted something, I think it was yesterday, that was like the people C students are running the world,
Mhm.
and I was like, she's not wrong,
Yep.
and I was certainly a C student. And I just didn't, again, I'm careful with my words because I always wish that I was just a natural A student, but that just wasn't me. And so, I was pretty lost after high school and like, what am I going to go do? But I just started working. I moved to New York City and I started working, and like I was saying, all of those jobs really prepared me, I think, for who I would ultimately become, and all the experiences I had working with other people, I think kind of like helped me like fine tune, becoming an entrepreneur.
It's all those small things over time that you didn't really notice became fundamental in altering who you were as an entrepreneur, as a
So
woman.
true. And I think if you're leaning into, and this is the advice I give my children and anybody who will listen, it's like if you really pay attention to what you actually love to do, it's like we've all heard like, oh, if you love your job, then it doesn't feel like a job, or there's
Yeah.
some right, but it's like, and you've heard that a million times, but it's so true. It's like I don't I don't think of my life or the things that I do now or when I was running Dry Bar like that. I really actually enjoy it. When my kids were like your kids' age was when I started Dry Bar, and I actually thought I would be a stay-at-home mom, and then I realized like I wanted to get out there and do something for myself, and I really craved a kind of fulfillment. And I love my kids and I wanted to be a mom for as early as I can remember. And I have the best relationship with my boys, but I also wanted something for myself. And I feel like that was really important for me to get out and to do something that was really fulfilling, and I think that that's when you're in the right spot. And I think that that can happen at any age, whether you're like 18 like me and moved to New York City and just want to go live in the city because I just couldn't stop thinking about New York City, or whatever that thing is for you. And if and also like respect for like, stay-at-home moms, like that is probably the hardest job that there is, which that wasn't it. That wasn't what I wanted to do. But I think whatever it is that fulfills you, and I think all those experiences that we learn along the way really do prepare us, to your point, for whatever we end up doing in the long run.
Talk to me about the moment where you had like the kahunas to go out and to be like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna give it my all. And I mean, granted, what a huge success. I mean, people know who you are, right? We don't have to talk about how that decision led to such great success because we all know you were probably sitting in some fears and doubts and limiting beliefs while you're at it. But like the moment that you decided, what was the turning point? Was it like, I have to try, or I can never live with what if? Like, what was the emotion downloading in you?
Um, I don't think I operate in fear, and I think that that is probably like the big difference between entrepreneur and no way I want to be an entrepreneur, right? Like I think there's that fear button that you have to like not be afraid to like throw it all out there and see what happens. I think I always felt like, what's the worst that could happen? I mean, we could lose money,
Mhm.
reputation, whatever, but I was just like, I don't, no one's going to die if this business doesn't work, I think for me, um, I just wasn't scared of failing. I guess that's in short the answer. I wasn't scared of it not working out. I really believed that it would, or hoped that it would, but certainly didn't know, and also like, and now we've been so inundated in our culture with like, failures aren't failures or that, or mistakes. They're learning experiences, which I actually think I've always known. I don't know if I would have articulated it like that, but I think it's like, well, let's just keep trying. We get like one go round. Let's do the thing that we really want to do, which is really like what I always tell people. I'm like, especially younger people who are like, I'm scared to do this. I'm supposed to do this. My parents want me to do this. Whomever wants me to do this. And this is the path I should take. Where I'm like, yeah, but where's the fun in that? Like, go do the thing that really lights you up. Go try the thing that you're scared of, but that you really love. And so I think I've just always had that compass for like, I'm going to do what I really want to do, not what everybody thinks I should do. And maybe that's a little bit of like the nonconformist in me that's like, I'm not going to do what everybody else is going to do. I'm going to go do the thing that I want to do? So,
It's also like
yeah,
perhaps just taking a chance on yourself and using your intuition more as data, right? Like if you
totally.
trust yourself, there's also speaking about memes of that movie where she's like, "Well, what if you fail?" And he's like, "That doesn't even cross my mind. Like, why would you even input that?" And I kind of that's the kahunas I was talking about. And like that's literally the answer right there is that you just felt like I have to try it and if it doesn't work, who cares, you know?
Right.
I think
Right. I mean, and I think that I've learned through my life that like nobody really cares what anybody else is doing. Everybody cares about what they're doing. So it's like if you let yourself get caught up in this like what will people think, and I'm in that world right now going from, selling Dry Bar 6 years ago to starting a new hair line that I don't know, it might people I mean, I don't even want to say it might not work because I know it's going to work, but there is the like, there could be the fear of like what if it doesn't? Well, so what if it doesn't? It's not a who cares, but it's like I mean, we have a lot of money and a lot of people invested whatever, and I really want it to work. But I also don't wouldn't let it stop me just because I mean, nobody knows anything about what's going to land, work, all of that.
yeah, I agree. What other things do you feel like success has taught you as a woman and a founder? Whether it's been success actually or failure. What is the different version that came of you from that?
I mean, I think there's probably like a fearlessness, which, kind of is like what we're talking about, right? It's just like not being afraid to like, be who I am or, step into this like leadership role. And, I know when we first started Dry Bar, I was very apprehensive about and kind of lost about like, how do I lead people? What am I supposed to do? What am I, and really like, you know, it would take me a while to really understand the kind of leader I wanted to be, like the impact I wanted to have on people, even think of those questions. It was just like you're thrown in and you do the best that you can, and it really took me a long time and a lot of feedback from people I really trusted, like my brother, who's my business partner, and our CEO at the time, John Hefner, of like really like understanding even like I said, like the impact I had on people. And like I used to walk into our stores and like lose my shit if I didn't like the way things were. And I learned how to like channel that in a better way that was more constructive, that didn't like put people on edge. And you just kind of learn as you go.
Who did you have to stop being and who did you have to kind of become in order to be like the founder that everybody recognizes right now?
That was an interesting journey for me. Like I said, I really didn't know how to do it. And so I was certainly stumbling around. I've told this story so many times, and it's in my book, The Messy Truth. But I'll never forget my brother pulling me aside and telling me that everybody was scared of me, and I was like, "What?" And I bit his head off, of course, when he told me that. And I was like, "Oh, I get it." And I really think it was actually my like intense, obsession with this business and everything being so perfect and everything being a certain way that I came across in this very harsh like nothing is good enough, which actually I think was a superpower. It's like I nobody was going to be as you know obsessive and
Love.
just yeah, there's nobody and it's really hard for anybody else other than a founder to have that kind of like a founder and owner, right, to have that kind of like just constantly pushing everybody to be better. And I really don't think that you want to lose that, but I think, like I was saying, I needed to figure out how to be a better leader and how to like deliver news better, how to get the best out of people. Fear wasn't going to do it. So once I got that, that bit of feedback that was very hard to hear and very hard to not get defensive to it, was when I started thinking I've got to change my approach here and be create an organization where people really want to
Mm.
be here. And I have to say, over the years, I think the best thing I can hear, which I'm grateful to hear a lot, usually through like DM or messages on Instagram, of people who worked for me years and years ago, who were like, you were so kind, you were so generous with your time, you talked to me about this, and like I don't remember all those conversations, but when I hear that stuff, that is, it's like people always ask me about like what's been the greatest thing about this journey. Like to me, that's one of the things that really resonates with me, of like I did make people feel really good, and that, I think that is, you know, the holy grail of all we do, right?
I agree
Yeah.
with you. The legacy component is not always like
Mm,
product or service or what you're delivering. It's how you
right.
make people feel, right? Like we're in the service industry and that's what
Yeah,
feel.
totally.
What was the decision for you to, obviously we're going to promote the book because it's fabulous, but for people who have,
Thank you.
like, what was the decision to be like, okay, it's time to exit. It's time to leave this beautiful, beautiful empire I've built.
Was a lot of things. Um, I think I really love like the build of something, and the like figuring it out. And by the time we sold Dry Bar, we were 10 years in. And not to say that there's always, things that you can improve and you can keep evolving. I think it was a lot of different things. So it was like we were 10 years in. Um it wasn't this small like business anymore. It had grown, rightfully so, into this huge business, with 10,000 employees, and a big corporate office. And I think one of the things that I really loved about it was the startup mentality, which we didn't really have anymore, which again was the right decision and the right thing to move the business, but it didn't feel the same to me anymore, coupled with the fact that my personal life had really started. You read the book, so my personal life really started to unravel. As my mom got sick and died very quickly of lung cancer, and my then 13-year-old son went into rehab. I got divorced. Like it was just like a whammy of so many things happening at once. And luckily, the business really was in a place, which was a great lesson in and of itself, that the business was really in a place where it didn't really need me to thrive and survive anymore, which I was so grateful for, because I was able to go deal with the fallout of what was happening in my personal life. But so I think all of that stuff together was like, I think I've done what I want to do here, and I think I want to move on. And it wasn't like there was some other opportunity that I was like, oh, I'm going to leave and sell Dry Bar to go do this, other than like just wanting to explore other things in general. There was all sorts of, really cool opportunities coming my way that I wanted to try. I wanted to just, flex some different muscles. And I just felt like for me, it had run its course, where I was just ready to move on to the next thing. I didn't foresee the book, The Messy Truth, at that point. I always kind of thought I would write a book really more about like my building this business and all the craziness that happened and all I learned, and like feeling like I got a degree on the job, like all of that. I didn't know that I was going to write all the personal stuff in it, but I just felt like I couldn't put a book out there about that whole experience without including the messiness of everything else that happened, and trying to like highlight the fact that, yeah, it's not always really pretty. It is usually pretty messy. It's just not enough people are talking about it. So I was just ready for the next thing.
I think that's one of the qualities I really, really respect about you is that you have no problem kind of laying the truth down. And I find that to be a very rare quality these days, especially in some cases where women have reached the success that you have. Um, when you left or when exited Dry Bar, then you started writing your book on like a personal note. I'm just interested. How was your nervous system? Was it ever like feeling like it was struggling to feel safe when you're divulging so much into a book, knowing that it's, going to be huge?
Yeah, I mean, well, I didn't know or think it would be huge. I just thought I felt like almost like a weird obligation, of like, and I think a lot of that was because, I was so lucky and grateful for so many people who helped me out along the way. People who would take calls from me who would help me in a myriad of ways. And I think that because I was, lucky enough to be kind of on the forefront of this like big entrepreneurial explosion, right? When you think about 2010, I mean, and when I started, there weren't a lot of like female role models that were running companies out there. I think about like Donna Karen, like I just remember that, I mean, Wendy Zomner, who started Urban Decay, we ended up having the same private equity guys, but there was far and few between. And so when Dry Bar took off and was such a phenomenon, then it was like, um, there was more of us starting to kind of enter this field, and like Candace Nelson and Rebecca Minkoff and all these women who I became friends with, and as Dry Bar grew and as I started doing more kind of mentoring and talking and speaking at things, like I just felt like authenticity kind of just kept coming back to me of like, I really want to tell the hard stuff too. And I think we as a society do that more today than we certainly did 16 years ago. And, mental health is so much more like in, our kind of normal vernacular because it's less taboo than it used to be. And, but I think that when I started writing my book, which was now like what, 4 years ago, I guess I started writing it. Um, I was, I mean, I was a little scared to put some of the stuff I put in there, and and it's just kind of this funny joke. Me and my brother, who he's long been my business partner in Dry Bar, and now I'm messy, and I mean, we almost never get on a call with like because we've raised money and we've been on these calls, and my brother would be like, "Well, I'm just kind of embarrassed that she told everybody everything," and I'm like, "I'm not embarrassed," but because it's very personal, as you read the book. There's some really personal stuff in there, but again, I felt this like not from anybody else, but almost like a self obligation to like let me tell like the real story. And the more I do that, and I think maybe this is part of what fuels me, the more, feedback I get from other women who are like, I'm going through that. And when you talk about it, it really helps me. And I feel the same way. When there's a woman that I admire and I see that she's dealing with something that I'm dealing with, you do just feel this like comfort in like not being alone. And so I just really felt compelled to highlight that for the same reason.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I actually, on the very first podcast of She Wears the Pants, told my truth in full transparency about being raised in a religious cult and XYZ. Um, and I thought I was freeing myself, but what I realized from everybody listening was it was giving them permission to step into their truth. And I think
Yeah.
the dialogue is so different when you understand that nothing that you do in this world is actually to be of service to you. It's to be of service
Hmm.
to others. And
I
I
love that.
just really appreciate, women who are willing to put it all on the line.
I love that framing, because that really does resonate with me. It's like I think, that there's nothing that feels better, right, than like doing something for somebody else, And I think as we get older, we start to learn that lesson. And I remember being a kid and like loving Christmas, like kids do, whatever, right? But then, like, as you get older and you become a mom, you're like, oh, I really love the giving part to my kids now, And then and to your great point, it's like, I find that I'm such I always want to do for other people, and it feels so good to me and maybe it's an interesting shift in like kind of being able to like do whatever I want for myself, whether I'm, buying myself something or treating myself to something. And I'm very big into self-care. And so I do all that stuff for myself. But at the end of the day, what feels the best is when I'm doing something for somebody else. And maybe that is part of the reason that I wrote the book. So thanks for that.
Also, you can prove why you're successful, right? Like the proof is in the pudding right here. It's because we're being of service to other people.
Mm.
What's
Love that.
the growth for you, all the way from like early entrepreneurship and now you're like back into startup growth, but from then to now, what has been the most challenging for you?
What has been the most challenging for me? Probably like figuring out who I am, what I like, and like what makes me tick. I think for many years, and it still happens, like, I'll put myself in a situation where I'm like, this doesn't feel good, this doesn't feel right, So I think you kind of the more you learn yourself and like what you'll take, what you won't take, in regards to everything, business, friendships, relationships, like, I think I'm um better now at like knowing myself, and knowing. I remember, like, my mom passed away 11 years ago, but I remember having conversations with her where she was like, your 40s is really where you start to like not care anymore and just do what makes you feel good. And I'm about to be 51. And so I think that like over the last few years, I've started to be like, I got to start doing things for myself and what feels really good to me instead of what I think is the right thing for whatever, situation I'm in. And I try to like live by that, which, it's taken me a long time to get to, of like, I'm gonna, and at some point you turn around and you're like, huh, like I can do whatever I want, within reason and like, or within the people that you love, but not to be like, oh, I have to do or say or live here or there, like I just upped and moved to Nashville about 2 months ago, and it was like, I didn't have to talk to anybody about that, other than my children and like figure out what they, whatever. But, and that's something that I remember just being like, huh, this feels weird because usually there's like parents or, somebody that's, mandating what you do. So,
Love that. The becoming, I think, is really important for the woman entrepreneur. I don't know about you, but I've had a scenario where I was granted something in my early stages of entrepreneurship, and it was like a gold mine, and I was not the woman that could hold it yet.
mm,
Crumbled under that success, which then I had to really understand that it's not about the vanity metrics of like money or power or whatever it is. It's about becoming the woman who can hold it at the end of the
mm,
day.
mm,
And I think it's again like you're so correct in learning how to become the woman where you don't have to
mm.
ask for permission, where you can co-create with yourself your own world that actually.
Right. Yeah.
Here we are from Dry Bar, then you're creating your book. Where did the idea come to you from Messy? What was the download on that one?
Well, it was really very organic, and very, based in personal necessity, similar to Dry Bar. I think it was, I mean, the short version of it is like I had, been through some craziness and wrote this book, and it's like my life had come back together and then fell apart again, like life does. And it was really actually in the COVID era that I was, like most of us, I wasn't going anywhere or doing anything. So I kind of wasn't blow drying my hair. And I recognized that my, my hair stopped breaking, and it's like all this heat damage had really taken a toll on my hair for 10 years of running this business. And to be clear, I'm not anti blowout, I'm not even anti heat. I just, the excess of it that I had been doing to my hair had really taken a toll. And during COVID, when I kind of stopped going anywhere and doing anything, I just, my hair all of a sudden started to get really healthy, and I was doing masks, and I was doing stuff on it that I just hadn't been doing previously. And I realized, and then I also started like kind of playing with my waves to like, because I kind of was in this like very black and white, either blowout or like a bun, and there was never an in between, and I never like allowed my natural hair, my naturally wavy hair, to like come out. It was always a blowout, or it was like in a bun. And I think I just felt like I had started to experiment with it, and I was like, there's gotta be a way, and I just, even as a longtime hairstylist, I didn't really know how to like kind of tame my frizz and my own waves. And so I started like, I like all of us, had a lot of time on my hands, and I started kind of like tinkering away with it, and I kind of started to figure out like methods of ways to handle my naturally curly hair, and that kind of led me to like there was like I was like mixing products to get things to work, but there was nothing really on the market that was like tailored to that. Even though there's like a lot of products for like curly hair, and then there's products for like a smooth blowout. I felt like I had kind of figured out that they're like, let's embrace the hair we have. Um, idea, and then it was like kind of coupled with the all the shit that I had been through, and so much I had done so much work on myself, and really started to embrace mantras and things like that. And so like product putting a mantra on a product, which also really hadn't been done. It's like, I am enough, or I am unbreakable, or I can begin again, like all these things that were very important to my kind of self-healing journey. Putting them on a product, and giving women that feeling was like bridging the gap between, like, as we know, when our hair looks good, we feel good, but I think that there's a deeper meaning to that, of this, like, which I very much learned, of like how you take care of yourself when you're trying to recover or heal from some sort of traumatic or just life being life, and that just reading that little thing makes a big difference. So I kind of set out on this mission, and called my friends at Sephora and said, I have this idea, to create a product line that's really nourishing and good for your hair, but also helps you like have another option if on days when you're not doing a blowout, or you don't just feel like you have to put your hair in a bun, that you can have this, like, and creating methods and different techniques for how to do it. Because I think women are really lost if they don't have that kind of, either it's a blowout and fully done, or I'm just throwing my hair up in a bun, and I've just never all the way also never really been a bun girl. Like, I don't, gives me a headache having my hair back. So I really wanted to figure out a way to do this, and then again, to kind of marry all that had happened to me into a product line, and so that's more or less how Messy was born.
You're like a true example of how one skill, one God-given dream vision can really direct the path, right? Like you were like blowouts, and now you're like in your messy freedom era. And
Yeah, it really is freeing too. I mean, and that's the thing too. It's like, like we were talking about earlier, it's like paying attention to that thing that you really love. And for me, like, I'm a beauty girl through and through, which is also why, by the way, I've never been like, I mean, there is like an element to, like, sure, this product, if you put this in your hair, brush it through and just tousle your hair and go, it's going to help with like frizz and soft hold and all the things that it does. But I like having like a thing that I do. Just like I like spending the 20 minutes it takes me to like put on my makeup, and I like doing my eyeliner. I like my mascara, and I like twisting my hair to make it look like this. Like, I like having a beauty routine. I just didn't want to be beholden to only having a blowout, And so that was very much, you know, what I was like hoping, and what I am hoping to create for other women. It's almost like giving them permission, because like I think we all love like the Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen, right? Like that hair. I know some women on here might not know who they are, but like they were kind of iconic with that hair. And it's like, how do I get that kind of hair, without having to use a curling iron, hot tools, and all of that. So
all the
I
jam.
just love, like, and yeah, I mean, this has just always been, hair has always been like my obsession. So, it's like, stick to what you know and what you're good at, you know?
Okay, I'm gonna wrap this up with the signature question.
Okay.
Looking back on your journey of wearing the pants, what message do you want to relay for future generations of women in business?
I think it's this like idea of, not letting anybody else kind of control your destiny, like really like doing what feels right to you, and not needing permission from anybody else to go do what you want to do, which comes with a caveat of like, I also have trusted people around me, so I'm not also like a I try to, I'm thoughtful with who I will take advice and feedback from. And I do think those people in your life are very important. Also be very discerning on who those people are. But I feel very lucky to have some really great people around me that I trust, but and who believe in me. And I would say that's the other part to that is like, surround yourself with people who really believe in you, and can tell you, you know, not every idea is a good idea. You know, it's like I find myself giving that advice, like, and I hear that a lot of like, you know, if this is the thing you want to do, go do it. Like sometimes that thing isn't a great idea, you know, so sometimes you need people around you and it can morph into something else that is a great idea if you have, you know, trusted people around you. But I do think at the end of the day, the overarching method is like, or the overarching method is to, you know, really listen to your instinct and not be afraid to go do the thing that you really want to do.
Yeah, prime example, my friend. All right,
Yeah.
for those listening who want to try the products, I have them, and who want to read the book, which I have, where can they go?
Thank you. Well, our website is itsmessy.com, which is our Instagram as well. It's messy.com. And I'm Allie Webb with WEBB, ALLIWEBB. It's my Instagram and all my stuff, and you can find it all there.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing
Yeah.
all of your wisdom and time today.
Thanks for having me. It was a great conversation.
This was She Wears the Pants, where women rise into what they're meant to hold. If this episode moved you, changed you, or challenged you, send it to a woman you want to see rise. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And if you're ready for deeper strategy, identity expansion, and high-level support, you can find me on Instagram at Ashley Deland. Until next time, keep leading boldly, building intentionally, and becoming the woman your calling requires.